why the US should have a 4-day work week. So the affirmative or the pro would say, yeah, we should have a 4-day work week, and the negative would say we shouldn't. So does anyone have an example of what uniqueness could look like for the affirmative?
Workers are overworked right now.
Yeah, exactly. That would be uniqueness. Workers are overworked right now. But that's kind of a claim as well. So essentially, there's a bit of a difference. The uniqueness would be painting a picture of the current world. So a majority of Americans complain about being unproductive due to a long work week. The claim would be a 4-day work week boosts productivity. So it's essentially the first part of your argument is the claim, and the uniqueness is setting up what the current situation is to tell your judge what's happening in the world.
Next part of the argument is the warrant. This is the meat of your argument. So you have the claim, it's just like maybe one sentence, one phrase. The warrant, put simply, is why your argument is true. For example, if I say cats are better than dogs, right? My warrant might be they're more cuddly or they look cuter, right? And put in the past example, if my claim is workers are overworked right now, right? Maybe my warrant would be their wages are stagnating and decreasing. Maybe it's that they're working longer hours. Maybe it's because the CEOs are putting more strain on them, right? These are all examples of warrants to back up your claim. And as the slide says, it explains why your claim is true, and it's the logical reasoning, right? Because every argument has a claim, right? But a claim is just a floating argument. For example, I can assert anything I want. I can say the sky is green, right? But that's not an argument until I back it with real proof, right? And also, the warrant is usually part of the link/internal link that we'll explain later if you don't understand that yet. But you should have warrants throughout your entire case, right? For example, your uniqueness should also have warrants. For example, like going back to the worker example, every thing needs warrants. Otherwise, it's just a floating claim that doesn't really serve much utility, because at the end of the round, your judge will think to themselves, wait, why does this matter? Why is this true? Why am I voting on this? Does that make sense? And is there anything unclear so far? Okay, for example, yeah, this was the example, right? So the claim and warrant is a part of every argument, and that's really what is going to be the meat of all your contentions and arguments that we do during this camp.
Alright, so let's talk about evidence. Remember, to preface this, warrants matter more. It explains why something matters. So before you have evidence, you have to find a warrant as to what you're saying. All evidence does is back that up. So instead of coming from a high school perspective, it's better if I have like an article from a professor or someone that can explain things better than I can. That's what evidence is used for. It's always to back up claims and warrants, not to overshine them. So remember, when you're using evidence, make sure that it has warrants underneath. But now I'll just explain like what the point of evidence is. So one, it builds credibility, right? The data that we use from evidence, or from our evidence, from respected individuals, is what everyone can trust and everyone can use. Secondly, it helps. It's not just about credibility, but also whether or not an argument is true. So, for example, the sites, dates, etc., and like where it comes from, all of which help prove that not only is your argument credible, but also that your argument is living up to the moment. So, for example, arguments about like the economy, right? If you have evidence from 1 month ago versus 1 day ago, whichever evidence is more recent is typically going to be better because it's more up to date on what's happening now. So that's where evidence comes in. It's only backing up your claims and warrants by building credibility and making sure that it's true now. So let's look to the worker example. The uniqueness is a majority of workers complaining about being unproductive because of a long work week. So instead of coming from me, if I had a distinguished, a survey that says that a bunch of Americans are feeling that they're unproductive, it's probably better than just coming from a high school perspective. So that's what we use evidence for.
Okay, your impact in your case is going to be one of the most important things about it because it argues like why your arguments that you have been saying throughout your entire case actually matter. Because if you tell your judge that right now people are getting burned out, and when you do like the affirmative, people are going to be less burned out, why does that matter to your judge? But if you add on that it's going to improve the economy because people are going to be more productive, then that gives your judge an impact and a reason for why your argument is important. And you can even go further than that. A lot of times in debate, the impacts boil down to things like economy, poverty, war, and all like mostly boil down to death. So you could say that when people are less burned out, they're more likely to be more productive, which helps the economy. And if the economy is going down, more people are pushed into poverty. And if there's a bad of poverty, if people are impoverished, there's a more likely chance that they're going to like lead to death. So there's a link chain for how you can lead to like that death impact, which is most of the times going to be what you're going to see in public forum debate. So that's like the big consequence in why your argument would matter. Explains the real world consequences and the reason why your judge should care for your impact. So again, like we say about the 4-day work week, when we have the impact about the economy increasing, that's why it would matter more than your opponent's impact. But this also goes into weighing, which we're going to talk about in a minute, which is basically if your opponent impact only helps the economy by like 10%, but yours could completely solve for the economy, it's going to be like weighing on the magnitude and why your impact is more important. But we're going to be talking more in depth about weighing in a second. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
And before we move on, this first introductory part was meant to be brief, but it might be too brief for some of y'all. So just to get a quick gauge of how well we are and how comfortable we are with this material, can everyone put their head down and on a scale of 1 to 5, rate how comfortable you are with this. 5 being very comfortable, 1 being I don't really know what's happening at all. Okay, we're gonna do one example and then we're gonna move on because this is pretty fundamental and it's just the principles of what's really happening. So quick recap, every contention needs a uniqueness, link, and impact. Someone shout out what the uniqueness is.
Like what's happening right now.
Current situation, describe what's happening now. What is the link? We don't know what the link is? I saw a lot of 5s, y'all.
It's like what connects a claim to the warrant or something.
Think about it as what happens after you affirm, right? And then what is the impact? Why it matters, final consequence, things like that, right? We're just gonna do one quick example and move on. For example, a past topic we had was the topic that's asked whether we should increase surveillance infrastructure on our southern border, right? And a very common argument on the AF was that we should because it would stop the cartels in Mexico, right? So can we just shout out what the uniqueness, link, and impact for that contention is?
Right now, a lot of drugs are being smuggled into the United States, leading to a lot of death.
Okay, that's the uniqueness. What's the link?
With tighter border control, like you can prevent this from happening.
Yeah, that's what happens after the act. So it's the link, impact.
People die due to drug overdose in the U.S. more often.
Yeah, great. So that's just the very fundamentals of stuff. So we can have a lot more fun after we get this done. I think we're gonna talk about weighing next, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we need a spot